She trained in war zones and flew through combat. But her first day as captain for a major airline, that's when the real danger began. Stripped of her flight, silenced by power, and caught in a game of sabotage, one woman dares to expose the truth before it's too late. Follow the gripping journey of Captain Sloane Carter. Under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, the polished stone floor of Dallas International Airport gleamed as Sloane Carter stepped through security, rolling her pilot's case behind her with quiet pride. She was 38, her natural curls pinned into a neat bun, her uniform crisped down to the last fold, each sleeve bearing 4 gleaming gold stripes, emblems of a full captain. After more than 15,000 flight hours, 3 military aerial deployments in Afghanistan, and a spotless record from the Air Force Academy, today marked her first commercial flight as captain with Aurelia Air, one of the oldest and most prestigious airlines in the United States. On her way to the crew briefing room for Flight AA-104 to Seattle, Sloane stopped by the crew lounge for a cup of coffee. She was no stranger to quiet glances, the way conversations paused when she entered, the quick side eyes, the faces that tried too hard to remain neutral. According to statistics, fewer than 1% of commercial pilots in the U.S. are black women, and today, she was the only person in the lounge wearing 4 stripes and dark brown skin. "You Carter?" A man's voice called from behind. She turned. A tall, silver-haired man with pale skin and matching 4-striped epaulets on his shoulders stood before her, Wade Harrington, a senior captain. "Welcome to Aurelia," he said, extending a hand. "I'm your check pilot for this flight." Sloane grasped his hand firmly. "It's an honor to fly with you." "Just call me Wade," he replied with a tight smile. "First flights are never easy, especially with the Rockies weather. I've reviewed the Seattle approach procedures thoroughly, and today's forecast shows only light turbulence." Sloane responded calmly. Wade nodded without expression. "Crew briefing room C. I'll see you in 5. Sloane tightened her grip on the case handle. Something felt off. The moment she stepped into the briefing room, the air turned heavy. 6 flight attendants and the first officer, Lucas Grant, a recent transfer from the West Coast Division, were already seated. He stood upon seeing her. "Looking forward to flying with you, Captain Carter." But before Sloane could respond, the door swung open. Raymond Doyle, the flight operations director, entered alongside Wade. "There's been a schedule change," Doyle said, avoiding her gaze. "Captain Harrington will be leading flight AA-104 today. Carter, please wait outside for reassignment." The room went still. "With all due respect," Sloane spoke up, her voice steady and deliberate, "I was assigned to this flight 3 weeks ago. We're factoring in experience." Doyle replied curtly. Sloane drew in a breath. She knew this fight wasn't meant to be won in that room. She nodded, placed her flight binder on the table, and walked out. The hallway felt colder as the door shut behind her. It was that quiet, familiar chill, the kind that sank beneath the skin, not from a lack of skill, but from the weight of unspoken bias. Today, being told to wait outside wasn't just an instruction. It was a test. And with every beat of her heart, every step she took, Sloane Carter was ready to answer it. She leaned against the frigid wall outside the crew briefing room, eyes fixed on the white tile floor, as if willing herself not to splinter from within. No one came out to call her back. No explanation. Just the click of polished shoes echoing on stone and the hollow silence of familiar exclusion. 17 minutes later, Lucas Grant emerged, his steps uncertain. He glanced around before hurrying toward her. "Captain Carter," he said quietly, I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't know they were switching pilots last minute." Sloane gave a small nod. "It's all right. You weren't the one making the call." Lucas swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just, I think you should have flown this one. Everyone knows you're more than qualified." Sloane didn't respond, but a look in her eyes said enough. She didn't need anyone's validation anymore. After he left, she turned, pulled out her phone, and opened a new note. The first line she typed read, "Monday, 6:08 a.m. AA-104 reassigned with no clear reason. Replacement, Wade Harrington." In that moment, she made a decision. She wouldn't react publicly, not yet. Truth needed proof, not emotion. And to get it, she would observe, document, learn how the system worked from the inside out. In the days that followed, Sloane was reassigned to shadowing duty, observing other captains under guise of familiarizing with company protocols. But it didn't take long for her to realize the policy applied to no one else but her. The first 3 captains she shadowed were all white men over 50. 2 barely acknowledged her presence. The third, Don Avery, was polite, but insisted on calling her young lady instead of captain. She didn't protest. She quietly took notes. On a flight from Dallas to Chicago, seated in the observer's jump seat behind the cockpit, Sloane noticed a maintenance log marked as completed, but missing a crucial signature. She asked gently, "Did you notice the cabin pressure test isn't signed?" Captain Don glanced up, frowned slightly, then waved it off. It happens. Tech guys forget sometimes. Long as the plane flies, we're good." Sloane smiled politely, but in her mind, a bright red flag was already logged. Bypass safety protocol. Flight AA 218. That evening, in her short-term rental in River North, Sloane gathered her notes. Ambiguous comments, subtle discrimination, overlooked procedures. Everything was documented with precision, coded in a system she developed back when she flew military missions. She knew she was venturing into dangerous waters. But as a pilot, her instinct was always to analyze, not react emotionally, but act on data. And now, the data was taking shape. No one knew, no one suspected, and certainly, no one imagined the woman once told to wait outside would quietly become the one to uncover it all. On a damp Thursday afternoon, after wrapping up a short-haul flight from Minneapolis, Sloane stopped by Aurelia Air's main maintenance hub under the pretense of learning more about ground operations. With her crew badge clipped to her collar, she stepped into the behind-the-scenes world of the airline, a place where technicians kept aircraft airborne, regardless of weather or politics. There, she met Tobias Toby Franklin, a stocky technician in his early 40s whose rugged appearance was offset by sharp, observant eyes. He was standing beside a newly landed 737, flashlight in hand, inspecting the nose gear bolts. "Captain Carter." Toby greeted her before she could even introduce herself. "Heard you're on a procedure observation tour. Want to look inside this metal bird?" "Only if you allow it," she replied with a faint smile. Toby led her around the fuselage and into the underbelly of the plane, where the air was thick with the scent of engine oil and scorched metal. Along the way, he shared what sounded like harmless anecdotes, stories of shortened inspection times, parts marked near expiry, still cleared for use. Streamlined checklists meant keep flights from being delayed. But then Toby's voice lowered as the two stopped beside a whiteboard cluttered with maintenance paperwork. "There are some things you can't just streamline," he said, pointing at a fully signed-off maintenance log. "See anything off?" Sloane leaned in. "The pressure valve inspection date. It matches the day the aircraft was flying in Houston?" Toby nodded. "Exactly. This was signed afterward, but backdated, which means someone forged a record to make it look legit." She froze. "You're sure?" "As sure as I wear a size 11, he replied, handing her another chart. "This one, too. Flaps jammed twice in the same month. No record of any part replacements." "And they still cleared to fly?" she asked. Toby gave a dry half-smile. "As long as there's no incident midair, well, let's just call it a little internal flexibility." Sloane took a long breath, her chest tightening. She'd flown into combat zones, made emergency landings in Reykjavik blizzards, but she'd never felt danger like this. Not from nature, but from people. "Has anyone reported this up the chain?" she asked. "Yeah. Sean Mallory, the West Division lead engineer. Last year, he raised a red flag about faulty engine mounting brackets. 3 weeks later, he fell off the maintenance platform, shattered his back, took early retirement. Accident." Toby shrugged. Officially, Sloane left the maintenance bay just as rain began to fall. Outside, an AA-320 roared off the runway, leaving a haze of exhaust in the damp air. She had no doubt anymore. Aurelia Air wasn't just biased. They were gambling with human lives. The next morning, Dallas lay under a gray sky. Fog still curled along the edges of the runway as Sloane Carter arrived at the technical bay, nearly an hour before her scheduled flight. In her hand was a list of aircraft assigned to her through the end of the month. And this time, she wasn't there to observe, to confront. Flight 308 to Boston this afternoon. Sloane said directly to the maintenance lead, a middle-aged man named Gary Hensley, well known for his close ties to upper management. I want a re-inspection of the left wing structure. According to the logs, it wasn't fully serviced during its last check. Gary raised an eyebrow. You're questioning the maintenance records? I'm questioning the suspicious overlap between the inspection date and the actual flight schedule. If everything's above board, a recheck shouldn't be a problem, should it? He pressed his lips into a thin line. Sloane, you've been here 3 weeks. Don't make waves. Word is, people upstairs are already keeping an eye on you. Then all the more reason to follow protocol, she said coolly. There were no more polite smiles between them. Gary hesitated for a few seconds, then gave a reluctant nod. Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you. As Sloane expected, the inspection revealed a minor irregularity in the wing strut. Not enough to ground the aircraft outright, but definitely enough to raise questions. She requested the findings be documented and the inspection extended, delaying the flight by 25 minutes. In the operations center, Kevin Park, the shift's dispatch coordinator, watched the control screen with tense eyes. He glanced at the display flashing, delayed flight 308, additional inspection ordered by Captain Sloane Carter. When he saw Wade Harrington pass through the room, face tight with irritation, Kevin let out a quiet sigh. He wouldn't say it out loud, but deep down he supported Sloane's call. He'd seen too many technical checks expedited on verbal orders from higher-ups. She's doing the right thing, he murmured, saving a copy of the inspection directive and moving it to a private drive. He couldn't act openly, but he knew this needed to be preserved. 3 hours later, Sloane received a message from Raymond Doyle, Aurelia Air's flight operations director. Meet me in Office 12D at 3:30 p.m. Don't be late. The small conference room sat deep within the operations wing. No windows, no warmth, just a metal table, a laptop, and a stack of neatly arranged files. Raymond sat at the far end, his face devoid of the friendly charm he'd worn during the welcome event for new pilots. Ms. Carter, he said, without offering her a seat, you're creating an image that doesn't align with your position. Delaying a flight based on instinct? I hope you understand the financial implications of every minute we lose. This wasn't instinct, Sloane replied, not blinking. It was based on technical standards and safety regulations. That's why we have an entire inspection team. You don't need to play the hero. He tossed the folder toward her. You've got a stellar record. Don't tarnish it over a few episodes of theatrics. Sloane picked up the folder. Inside were detailed reports of every instance she had requested additional checks, each one annotated with phrases like incurred unnecessary costs. She understood the message. This was a warning shot. She walked out of the meeting room, throat dry but stride steady. What filled her wasn't just anger. It was resolve. That night, back in her small River North apartment, Sloane opened her laptop and created an encrypted folder named Hawk_Records. She began cataloging every suspicious conversation, every vague email, every skipped inspection. Each entry time-stamped, tagged with names, and backed by photo or audio evidence when available. But then, a strange message lit up her phone screen. I have information you need. You shouldn't be standing alone. Meet me at Sky Bar, 9 p.m. tomorrow. LK. Sloane stared at the message, heart pounding. A new ally or a trap. Either way, she knew she was too far in to turn back. Since that tense meeting with Flight Operations Director Raymond Doyle, the atmosphere around Sloane Carter had thickened. Everywhere she went inside Aurelia Air's Dallas HQ, eyes followed her. Some avoided eye contact. A few nodded in quiet solidarity, but most stayed silent. And that silence only pushed Sloane to act faster. She knew she couldn't do this alone. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about the lives of thousands of passengers flying on aircraft with artfully corrected maintenance records. One late afternoon, Sloane found Tobias Toby Franklin in the maintenance bay. He was checking the hydraulic system on a Boeing 737 MAX when she approached. No need for small talk. The look they exchanged said enough. I have a few records I need to cross-check against the technical logs, Sloane said quietly. Toby looked up, wiped his hands on an oil rag, and nodded. Follow me. In a chilly storage corner, Toby switched on a small halogen lamp and pulled out an old personal laptop. Here's everything I've logged over the past 6 months. Do a comparison. You'll see the inspection dates in the internal system don't match the actual aircraft data. After her meeting with Toby, Sloane spent time cross-referencing technical documents, but she hadn't forgotten about her secret meeting with LK. At exactly 9 p.m., she arrived at the appointed location, Sky Bar, perched atop a boutique hotel overlooking Dallas International Airport, twinkling in red and amber runway lights. Sloane took the corner table just as instructed, her loosely styled hair hiding the tension on her face. A glass of untouched bourbon sat in front of her. A few minutes later, a woman entered, leather jacket, sharp features, a lean frame. She walked straight over her and, without preamble, said, "Lena Kingsley, call me LK, and you have what I need?" LK nodded and set a small silver USB on the table. "I used to be a technical coordinator at Aurelia Air. I believed they truly cared about safety. But 3 years ago, after I reported a structural fault in the 749 MAX wing frame, I got reassigned. They didn't investigate. Instead, they diverted the issue by falsifying the inspection timeline." She handed Sloane a stack of photocopied documents, images of tampered maintenance logs, internal emails between the maintenance director and legal department, along with a handwritten note. "If you're going to take them on, you should at least have the truth." "You've seen the tip of the iceberg," Lena continued. "I brought you what's beneath. Inside are lists of aircraft marked repaired that were never inspected, plus scanned versions of original reports that were altered." Sloane tightened her grip on the glass. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Lena gave a tired smile. "Because no one believed me 3 years ago. But now I believe in you." Sloane sat in silence. Everything she suspected now lay before her. Detailed, systematic, undeniable. When she looked up, Lena's expression had softened. "I couldn't do it alone," Lena said. "But you have a voice. If you stand up, there are many of us ready to stand with you." Sloane picked up the USB. "I'm not sure I'll be safe once I go public with this." "None of us ever are," Lena said with a quiet laugh. "But justice has never lived in the comfort zone." Before leaving, Lena leaned in and whispered, "Keep an eye on Wade Harrington. You'll find more than you expect." When Sloane left Sky Bar that night, her heart no longer sank under the weight of isolation. She knew the fight ahead would be hard, and she had more to uncover. But now, she wasn't fighting alone. The next day, Sloane began expanding her internal network, reaching out to people she could trust. She started with those who were often overlooked, the cogs in the system dismissed as background roles. Kevin Park, a Korean-American and longtime operations coordinator at Aurelia Air who handled flight scheduling and back-end crisis management, was one of them. "I saw you stand up for what's right," Kevin said during a quick meeting in the staff cafeteria. "That flight, I logged the delay order and the actual inspection time. If needed, I can verify it wasn't just a delay without cause like the maintenance department claimed." Sloane nodded, grateful. "I won't ask you to go public, unless you choose to." "Not yet," Kevin replied. "But if everything collapses, I don't want to be the one who stayed silent while you had to protect everyone else." Sloane nodded again, knowing she found her second ally. The third came soon after Jenna Ortiz, a seasoned lead flight attendant. After a red-eye flight to Los Angeles, she sought Sloane out in the crew lounge. "I've been flying long enough to know what's a mistake and what's an order from above," Jenna said, pulling up a chair beside her. "If you're brave enough to step out of the safe zone, I'm not letting you do it alone." 3 people, a technician, a coordinator, and a flight attendant, now formed a quiet alliance. No pledges, no formal agreements. But they all understood any misstep in this investigation could be twisted by Aurelia Air into a reason for termination. It was through building this network that Sloane uncovered a critical piece of the puzzle. Thanks to the insights of Toby, Kevin, and Jenna, one name kept resurfacing like a shadow behind every decision: Wade Harrington. Toby revealed that whenever someone in the maintenance crew tried to report violations, they'd receive a reminder email from legal, emails that were, in reality, drafted under Wade's direction. Jenna recalled a closed-door meeting in the operations office, where Wade had threatened to freeze the promotion records of anyone who dared to stir up trouble. Piecing the information together, Sloane now had a clearer view of Wade Harrington's role within Aurelia Air. He wasn't just a long-time senior captain. He was also a high-ranking member of the airline's internal board. From the shadows, he manipulated policy decisions, blocked reform efforts, and defended the old guard system of privilege. Nearly every issue related to maintenance violations had his fingerprint on it. To avoid surveillance, the Internal Alliance communicated only through burner phones and met in unexpected places: warehouse corners, tiny cafes in the local Vietnamese district, even inside an old movie theater on the outskirts of Dallas. "Feels like I'm living in a spy movie," Kevin once whispered during a meeting in the basement of an abandoned library. "If it's a spy movie about airplanes, then clearly I'm the one who wrote the script," Jenna said with a shrug. "I just hope the ending doesn't involve a crash." Sloane looked around, the faint light filtering through the door crack. She had never felt reality press so sharply, so urgently. "There won't be any accidents," she said, her voice firm. "Not if we can stop them." Monday, 8:12 a.m., Sloane Carter walked into the Dallas headquarters of Aurelia Air with a calm stride. She had learned how to master emotions behind a professional front, an old skill from her military days. But when she swiped her badge at the electronic door to the flight operations wing, the light blinked red. A dull tone sounded. "Access denied." She tried again, same result. "Looks like your account has been temporarily suspended." A voice called from behind. It was Alyssa Brennan, chief assistant in the HR department, always clad in gray skirts and a name tag that seemed welded to her like PARI uniform. "Please follow me to room 417. Alyssa continued before Sloane could respond. "There are a few procedural changes we need to clarify." In a glass-walled conference room, lit with the sterile white glow of fluorescent lights that made everything feel colder than it was, Sloane now faced three people: Alyssa, an unfamiliar senior HR representative, and Chief Operations Officer Raymond Doyle. "Captain Carter," Raymond began, his tone syrupy, as if congratulating her on winning the lottery. "Based on recent observations and feedback from mid-level management, we're temporarily placing you under cultural alignment review. It's a standard procedure." "Cultural alignment?" Sloane repeated. "Steady. I don't recall any SOP clause that prohibits pilots from questioning maintenance irregularities." Raymond smiled but said nothing. The HR rep handed her a thick file. "Effective immediately, your access to internal documents, flight logs, and technical briefings will be suspended. We're also revoking your company email and operational system credentials." "And what will I be doing during this review?" she asked. "You'll undergo a series of reintegration trainings," Alyssa said flatly, "on teamwork, constructive communication, and organizational loyalty." At that moment, the conference room door opened and Wade Harrington walked in. He made his way toward Sloane's seat, not loud, not dramatic, just a slight smile and a quiet statement. "You're a good pilot, Carter, but being good doesn't mean you can't be replaced." Sloane looked at the four people in front of her. They didn't expect resistance. They wanted her to feel isolated, monitored, and powerless. But instead of backing down, she gave a small nod. "Very well," she said. "Just send me the training schedule. I'll get started right after my morning coffee." As Sloane left the office, she passed the operations room and saw Wade standing by the window, quietly watching her through the reflective glass, as if he had known every step she would take. It was clear now, her suspension wasn't Doyle's idea. It had Wade Harrington's fingerprints all over it, delivered by Doyle, but orchestrated from behind the scenes. She didn't head to the Aurelia Air Cafe. Instead, she walked straight to a small place on York Avenue called Juniper's Brew, where Jenna Ortiz was already waiting. "I take it you've heard?" Sloane asked, setting down her cappuccino. Not even 5 minutes after they locked your account. Jenna nodded. They think putting you in internal review will make you back off. They're wrong, Sloane said, eyes scanning the street outside. All it proves is that they're afraid. That night, Kevin Park sent her a secure link, an encrypted cloud folder containing hundreds of tampered maintenance records. Toby left a USB drive in the glove box of her car, along with a handwritten note. If they're willing to lock you out, it means you're exactly where you need to be. And Sloane knew the storm she had started was only just beginning. 2 days later, the boardroom on the 14th floor of Aurelia Air headquarters was so cold, the air itself felt frozen. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the long walnut conference table where 8 members of the leadership team sat. Chief Operations Officer Raymond Doyle, Legal Director Sylvia Marsh, and 2 members of the Executive Council among them. At the head of the table sat Wade Harrington, not by accident. As a senior member of the airline's board, Wade had no official operational role, but everyone knew he was a hand behind the curtain, the proxy of Aurelia's old guard investors. His presence at this meeting was a clear signal. They wouldn't let Sloane unravel their system without a fight. Sloane Carter entered, no longer in her pilot's uniform, but walking with the same unyielding poise. In her hand was a thick black folder. "Thank you for coming," Raymond said, trying to maintain his usual polished tone. "We understand you have something to share." "Not something," Sloane replied, setting the folder down on the table. "The truth and a choice." She opened the folder, pulling out document after document. Photos of malfunctioning pressurization systems cleared for flight, maintenance logs with falsified dates, internal emails bearing executive signatures discussing how to streamline procedures by shortening safety inspections. Sylvia Marsh's face paled as she skimmed the first page. "These documents," Sloane said, "were sent to Federal Aviation Administration this morning. A second copy went to the Denver Sentinel, and the third," she looked up, "is stored safely with instructions to go public if there's any attempt at retaliation or cover-up." Wade was the first to respond, raising an eyebrow, not angry but cold. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice unsettlingly calm, "do you really think a few internal files and anonymous claims are enough to shake a 60-year-old airline?" Raymond clenched his jaw, but Sylvia couldn't stay silent. "Are you blackmailing this company?" "No," Sloane replied. "I'm forcing you to face the consequences of your own choices." After she laid down her ultimatum, it was Wade who leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced, as if calculating damage control for the entire board. "If we concede," he said, "we set a precedent. She's not just challenging a process, she's challenging tradition." His eyes swept across the other executives, a silent order to hold the line. The silence barely lasted 3 seconds before the conference room door burst open. A breathless IT staffer rushed in, holding a laptop. "Sorry to interrupt, but the internal site just crashed, and a leaked video of the pressurization failure is all over the internet. Nearly 500,000 views in under an hour." "What?" Sylvia snatched the laptop, her face draining of color. "That," Sloane said calmly, surveying the chaos in the room, "is the moment I warned you about. I didn't leak it, but someone in the maintenance team did. Someone who believes the truth shouldn't be buried." Raymond clasped his hands on the table, trying to steady his voice. "What do you want?" "3 things," Sloane said clearly. 1. Immediately ground all aircraft flagged for maintenance violations until they're inspected by an independent regulator. 2. Guarantee that no employee who cooperated with me will face retaliation or termination. And 3. The board must issue a public commitment to structural reform, including leadership changes at the top. Wade Harrington was losing his composure. He slammed his hand on the table and hissed, "You think you just won? You've torched your own career." "You've got to be kidding," another board member muttered. Sloane shook her head. "I didn't come here to joke." 5 minutes later, Raymond stood up. "We need to deliberate privately." Sloane nodded. "You have 30 minutes. After that, I call CNN." She walked out, leaving the thick file open on the table. Every eye drawn to the bold-faced title stamped across the top page. Violation of FAA maintenance standards. Internal acknowledgement. Out in the hallway, Toby was already waiting. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Not okay," she replied, "but going the right way." Less than a week after that fateful boardroom showdown, news of Aurelia Air exploded across national headlines. Third largest U.S. airline grounded by FAA over severe maintenance violations. The headline ran everywhere, from the New York Times and CBS Morning News to YouTube channels hosted by independent aviation analysts. Sloane sat on the balcony of her 12th floor apartment in downtown Dallas, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. Inside, the living room TV played footage of rows of Aurelia aircraft being towed from gates, their engines covered in canvas, red warning lights blinking across diagnostic screens. In the background, reporters described the FAA's official lockdown of the airline's headquarters, now sealed with large FAA hold tag at the main entrance. Next to her, Kevin Park held up a tablet displaying the formal notice from the Federal Aviation Administration. Aurelia Airlines' operating license is hereby suspended due to systemic, deliberate, and prolonged violations of aviation safety regulations. "We did it," Kevin whispered. "Not quite," Sloane replied, her gaze distant. The real damage was done to the passengers who put their trust in them, and the employees who were silenced for far too long. Later that afternoon, a press release from Aurelia Air confirmed the company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The executive board was officially dissolved. Raymond Doyle, Sylvia Marsh, and several board members were summoned for emergency hearings by the U.S. Senate Transportation Committee. On social media, the hashtag #GroundedByGreed quickly went viral. As for Wade Harrington, he became the top target in a federal investigation. A whistleblower from the IT department leaked an internal recording where Wade was heard ordering staff to wipe all internal notes referencing unresolved technical issues. Within aviation forums, his name became a symbol of unchecked power and corporate rot, complete with its own trending hashtag #WadeGate. 3 weeks later, in the very same boardroom on the 14th floor, once cold and tense, a new symbol gleamed on a polished brass nameplate: Skybridge Air. The new airline had been formed from the legally salvageable assets of Aurelia, taken over by a group of independent investors, including representatives from the Civil Aviation Engineers Association and several appointed advisors from the FAA. Sloane stepped in, this time wearing a new uniform, a crisp navy blue jacket with four golden stripes gleaming on her shoulders. A white woman in her 50s, with short cropped hair, reached out a hand. "I'm Linda Myers, the new CEO, and without you, we wouldn't have been able to rebuild from the wreckage. I want you to lead the internal safety oversight program at Skybridge. You'll report directly to me." Sloane paused, taken slightly off guard, then shook her hand. "If the goal is to rebuild trust from the ground up," she said, "then I won't say no." In another corner of the room, Toby, Jenna Ortiz, and Kevin Park stood watching a video on a phone. The now viral clip of someone inside the system finally standing up, confronting the powers that be. A whistleblower wearing the uniform again? Jenna teased. "Guess the airline industry really is turning the page." Sloane laughed, her first real, unguarded laugh in months. "Not a new chapter," she said. "A whole new genre." 1 month after Skybridge Air officially launched, Sloane Carter stepped up to the podium at Purdue University, the very place she once dreamed of attending as a young girl in Southfield, Michigan, to study aerospace engineering. Now, she wasn't just a captain who blew the whistle on corruption. She was a newly appointed executive at the airline everyone in the country was watching. On stage, she wore not a pilot's uniform, but a sleek black blazer. Her name badge read, Sloane Carter, Director of Internal Safety and Culture, Skybridge Air. "Less than a year ago," she began, her eyes scanning the packed audience of students, professors, reporters, and FAA representatives, "I was just a pilot, like thousands of others. I loved the skies, lived for precision, and believed in the system I served. But I came to learn something many of us are afraid to confront. Sometimes the system doesn't need us to serve it. It needs us to question it." The room fell silent. Sloane paused, then continued, her voice firm. There's nothing more powerful than the courage to speak the truth, especially when that truth might cost you the career you spent 20 years building. But the skies taught me this. Headwinds make better pilots, and adversity builds change. After the speech, she received an invitation from a National Aviation Safety Board to join a special advisory panel tasked with reshaping risk reporting protocols and strengthening whistleblower protections across the entire industry. What had once branded her a troublemaker was now become the gold standard for professional integrity. The press dubbed her the woman who brought truth back to the cockpit. Online, her speech video garnered over 4 million views in just 72 hours. Airlines across the country began reaching out, seeking her insight on how to reform from within without losing employee trust. In a Skybridge executive boardroom a few weeks later, Sloane presented her first major initiative, the creation of a fully anonymous reporting system, not just for maintenance crews, but for every employee, from pilots to baggage handlers. No one is too small to speak up, she said, and no issue is too small to be ignored. After the meeting, Linda Myers walked over and smiled. You haven't just changed an airline, Sloane. You're changing an entire industry. Sloane smiled back, her eyes drifting toward a large poster in the main lobby, a Boeing 787 ascending into a sky of perfect blue, with the words beneath it. Safety isn't checkbox. It's a culture. And now, she was the one shaping that culture. One crisp autumn evening, nearly 5 years after Aurelia Air collapsed, Sloane Carter sat alone in her office at Skybridge's new Seattle headquarters. Outside her window, twilight stretched over the Olympic Mountains in soft streaks of amber and blue. On her desk, among internal audits and partner airline proposals, was a thin, pale yellow envelope. No return address, just careful handwriting across the front. To Sloane Carter, personal. She picked it up and opened it gently. Inside was a letter. Sloane, you may not want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you if you never reply. But after years of silence, I think it's time I said what I should have said a long time ago. I was wrong. I let bias, power, and ego blind me. When I told you to wait outside that day, I wasn't just removing you from flight. I was deliberately blocking a woman of color with skill, experience, and integrity from rising because I was afraid you would outshine me. I watched what you did after that, and I have to admit, it was you who saved this industry from far worse things I once helped to hide. I'm sorry, not for reputation, not for redemption, but because I've come to truly understand that change is necessary, and I've started changing myself. Wishing you skies ever higher, ever wider. Wade Harrington. Sloane read each line slowly. The letter left her silent, not because of who had signed it, but because of the truth woven into every word. She remembered Harrington's arrogance on that first day, his cold rejections, the way he had led a culture of exclusion, and yet now he had admitted defeat, and more importantly, he had acknowledged the possibility of repair. She folded the letter, placed it gently on her desk, and leaned back in her chair. This wasn't a victory. It was a closing. A chapter finally ended by the very man who had once written it wrong. Weeks later, beneath a crystal-clear dawn at Seattle Tacoma International Airport, Sloane stepped into the cockpit of a brand-new Dreamliner bearing the Skybridge logo. The familiar 4 gold stripes still gleamed on her sleeve, the mark of a captain. Beside her sat Ava Kim, a young pilot fresh out of the multi-ethnic training program Sloane herself had helped establish. Ava adjusted her headset, eyes bright with anticipation. "Captain Carter," she said softly, "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Sloane smiled, eyes fixed on the runway ahead. "You'll go far, Ava. The sky doesn't care who you are, as long as you're ready to fly." She eased the throttle forward. The plane turned into runway 34L. The wind was gentle, the sky clear, and as the wheels lifted off the ground, Sloane Carter knew with absolute clarity, change was real, and those who dare to rise for what's right are the ones who keep our skies safe for everyone,